In the bottom of the 11th inning at the Metrodome, Kirby Puckett stepped into the batter's box with the 1991 World Series still unresolved. The Twins and Braves had already traded 5 games. Minnesota was 1 loss from elimination, and every pitch carried the weight of a season that had changed direction. Earlier that night, Puckett had driven in the opening run with a triple. In the 3rd inning, he had leaped in front of the plexiglass wall in left field to take an extra base hit away from Atlanta's Ron Gant. Now, the scoreboard showed the bottom of the 11th. Charlie Leibrandt was on the mound. Puckett worked the count to 2-1. Then he drove the ball out. The Metrodome erupted as Puckett rounded the bases with his arms raised. The home run sent Minnesota to Game 7, and the Twins would win the championship the next night, 1-0 in 10 innings. For millions of baseball fans, that became the Kirby Puckett image. The compact figure, the white uniform, the raised arms, the entire stadium reacting to one swing. But that home run was only the most visible instant in a career that had begun far from a World Series spotlight. Before Puckett became the face of the Minnesota Twins, before the Gold Gloves and batting title and Hall of Fame plaque, he was a kid from Chicago who had to build his baseball world one repetition at a time. Kirby Puckett was born on March 14, 1960, in Chicago, the youngest of William and Catherine Puckett's 9 children.
His father worked 2 full-time jobs, one at a department store and another at the post office, while his mother raised the family. The Pucketts lived in a 3-bedroom apartment in the Robert Taylor Homes. Puckett taught himself to play baseball by hitting and throwing against a wall. There was no major league future guaranteed by the setting, and no professional scout waiting around the corner to explain what came next. There was simply the wall, the ball, and the repetition. At Calumet High School, Puckett became an All-American baseball player. Even then, the attention he received from scouts was limited. He took a job installing carpeting in new cars for the Ford Motor Company, and for a time, professional baseball was not a clear destination. Then Ford laid him off. That change led Puckett to an open tryout hosted by the Kansas City Royals. The tryout did not immediately make him a professional player, but it did lead to a college baseball scholarship at Bradley University. In 1981, he led the Bradley Braves with 8 home runs, 21 stolen bases, and a .660 slugging percentage. He hit .378, second on the team. The next turn in the story was more painful. After the sudden death of his father, Puckett's grades suffered, and he transferred to Triton College after 1 year at Bradley. At Triton in 1982, his baseball made the decision easier for Minnesota. Puckett batted .472 with 16 home runs and 78 runs batted in.
He was named the National Junior College Athletic Association Player of the Year. That was the season that converted a lightly noticed player into a serious draft choice. The Twins selected him 3rd overall in the January 1982 draft. Even the signing did not happen without resistance. Minnesota initially offered Puckett $6,000. He turned it down and eventually signed for $20,000 after the JUCO World Series. The path from a Chicago housing project to the 3rd pick in a major league draft had taken him through a wall, a factory job, a tryout, 2 colleges, academic trouble, and the death of his father. The Twins were making a bet, but Puckett had already spent years proving that missed chances did not have to be final. He began in the rookie-level Appalachian League with the Elizabethton Twins. In 65 games, he hit .382 with 3 home runs and 35 RBI, winning the league batting title. In 1983, Minnesota moved him to the Single-A Visalia Oaks in the California League. He hit .318, drove in 97 runs, stole 48 bases, and played 138 games. The numbers showed a player who could hit, run, and stay on the field. They also suggested that the next step would come quickly. Puckett began the 1984 season at AAA Toledo. 21 games into the year, the Twins brought him to the majors for good.
His debut came on May 8 against the California Angels. 5 at-bats, 4 hits, 1 stolen base.
For a player arriving with far less advance attention than many top prospects, there could hardly have been a clearer introduction. But the first game was only the beginning. The daily challenge would be harder. Could he turn a spectacular entrance into a major league career? In 1984, Puckett hit .296 and finished 4th in the American League in singles. He was not yet the finished star people would later remember. He was a contact hitter, learning how to survive the schedule, the pitching, and the demands of center field at the highest level. The following season, he led the American League in at-bats and ranked near the top of the league in hits, triples, and plate appearances. He played 161 games. That kind of presence matters in baseball because it changes how a team experiences a season. A player who is in the lineup almost every day becomes part of the structure around him, even before the awards arrive. If you watched baseball in the mid-1980s, this was the kind of player you could come to recognize gradually. The uniform was the same from one night to the next. The at-bats accumulated. The line drives kept finding space. In center field, Puckett's name appeared again and again in the defensive statistics, alongside the putouts and assists that reflected how much ground he covered. By 1986, the shape of his career had changed. Puckett hit .328 and made his first All-Star team.
He finished near the top of the American League in runs, hits, total bases, at-bats, doubles, home runs, extra base hits, and slugging percentage. He had begun to emerge as more than a singles hitter. The power was becoming visible, but it did not replace the earlier parts of his game. It joined them. His speed still mattered. His contact still mattered. His ability to play center field every day still mattered. Puckett was becoming the kind of player who could influence a game in several different ways, often before anyone had time to reduce him to one statistic. That year, his defense received its first major recognition when he won a Gold Glove. For Minnesota, the award marked a larger development. The young outfielder who had once been easy for scouts to overlook was now becoming one of the American League's most complete players. His size had not changed the way a conventional prospects might have. The expectations around him had, and the timing mattered. The Twins had not reached the postseason since 1970. Puckett had established himself in the majors, but the biggest stage was still waiting. The next question was no longer whether Kirby Puckett belonged. It was how much a player like him could change the fortunes of a franchise that had been waiting years for October to return. In 1987, the Twins finally gave him that stage. Minnesota finished the regular season 85-77, a record that did not look like the profile of a championship team.
But the postseason changed the scale of everything. Puckett hit .332 with 28 home runs and 99 runs batted in, and the Twins reached the World Series for the first time since relocating to Minnesota. Before October, there was a game in Milwaukee that showed just how far his offensive game had come. On August 30, Puckett came to the plate 6 times against the Brewers and collected 6 hits. 2 of them left the ballpark. One came off Juan Nieves in the 3rd inning. The other came against closer Dan Plesac in the 9th. By the end of the night, every trip to the plate had produced a hit. Those are the games that can make a player feel larger than a season. A single hit can be absorbed into a box score. 6 hits in 6 at-bats, with 2 home runs in between, becomes something people carry away from the stadium and repeat to each other afterward. Puckett had begun the year as an established star. Nights like that made him feel unstoppable. The Twins did not have an easy path through October. Puckett hit only .208 in the American League Championship Series against Detroit, but Minnesota still won in 5 games. Then, in the World Series against the St. Louis Cardinals, he batted .357 as the Twins completed a 7-game upset. The championship established Puckett as a winner. The seasons that followed established something more lasting. He was not simply a postseason personality who had arrived at the right time. In 1988, he hit .356, the highest average of his career,
and drove in 121 runs. He hit 24 home runs and finished third in American League MVP voting for the second consecutive season. If you remember late 1980s baseball, you remember how much of a star could be built through repetition. The player who kept appearing in the lineup, the center fielder who was always somewhere near the top of the hit column, the name that became familiar before the full resume was complete. Puckett's game had a particular balance. He could hit for average, reach the gaps, run, play center field, and now provide meaningful power. He was not being carried by one extraordinary skill. He was accumulating advantages in every part of the game. In 1989, he won the American League batting title with a .339 average. He led the league in hits and finished second in doubles and singles. In April, he recorded his 1,000th major league hit, becoming the fourth player in baseball history to reach that number in his first 5 seasons. For Minnesota, his value had become impossible to overlook. After the 1989 season, Puckett signed a 3-year contract worth $9 million, making him the first baseball player to earn at least $3 million per season. The number mattered because it showed how the game now valued him. The kid who had once been offered $6,000 by the same organization was no longer a gamble at the edge of the system. He was the franchise's central star.
But baseball rarely allows a career to move in a straight line. In 1990, Puckett's batting average dropped to .298, and the Twins fell to last place in the American League West with a 74-88 record. It was a down season for both player and team, not a collapse of the career. The championship was beginning to recede, and Minnesota had to find its way back. That recovery came in 1991. Puckett hit .319, and the Twins surged past Oakland in the middle of the season to win the division. In the American League Championship Series, they faced the Toronto Blue Jays. Puckett batted .429, hit 2 home runs, drove in 5 runs, and was named ALCS Most Valuable Player. The World Series matched Minnesota with the Atlanta Braves. Both teams had finished last in their divisions the year before winning their league pennants, a turnaround that had never happened before. The series became a collision between 2 teams that had already remade their own expectations. Going into Game 6, the Twins trailed 3-2. Each team had won its home games, and Minnesota now needed one more victory at the Metrodome to extend the series. The place was built for a night like this. Artificial turf under the lights, the ball striking gloves and bats in the enclosed stadium. The noise gathered above the field and pushed back down toward the players. In the early innings, the game still had the shape of a baseball game.
By the end, it would become something people remembered as a personal event, even if they had only watched from home. Puckett gave Minnesota the lead in the first inning. Chuck Knobloch reached base, and Puckett drove him in with a triple. In the third, Atlanta's Ron Gant lifted a ball toward left field. Puckett went back to the plexiglass wall and leaped, taking away what would have been an extra base hit. The play kept Atlanta from gaining more than the out itself. It also showed the part of Puckett's value that a home run could never explain. The jump, the speed, the willingness to make the field feel smaller for the hitter. The Braves stayed in the game. The lead disappeared. The innings continued. Then regulation ended with the World Series still tied. One extra inning passed. Then another. The Metrodome crowd had been waiting through the pressure of a game that refused to finish, with the score keeping the entire championship in suspension. In the bottom of the 11th, Puckett came to the plate first. Charlie Leibrandt threw the pitch. Puckett drove it out of the park. The ball cleared the wall, and the game was over. Puckett rounded the bases with his arms raised while his teammates poured toward home plate. The Twins had survived. Minnesota had another game to play. And if you were watching baseball in 1991, this was the kind of moment that could turn a player into a permanent part of your own memory.
Maybe you saw it live.
Maybe you saw it again on the news, in a highlight package, or in the replay that kept returning to the same swing and the same celebration. For Minnesota fans, the Metrodome was no longer simply where the game had been played. It was where Puckett had changed the World Series. The next night, Jack Morris threw a 10-inning complete game, and the Twins won Game 7 by a score of 1-0. Minnesota had its second championship in 5 seasons. Puckett's home run became the defining image, but the Game 6 performance had included the entire player, the triple, the catch, the extra inning swing, and the emotion afterward. That was why the moment held so strongly. It did not create his reputation from nothing. It compressed everything he had become into one night. The danger was that one night could also become the limit of the public memory. Puckett continued to play at an elite level after 1991. In 1992, he led the American League in position player wins above replacement with a total of 7.1, reflecting how much he contributed with both his bat and his glove. He remained one of Minnesota's most productive players even as the championship window closed. Later in his career, he shifted from center field to right field, but the change did not erase his importance. It marked another phase of a career that was adapting while still producing. In 1994, Puckett moved into right field and led the American League in runs batted in.
He drove in 112 runs in only 108 games, a pace that would have projected to 168 RBI over a full season. Then, on June 26, he broke the Twins' career hits record. The record had belonged to Rod Carew, one of the most important hitters in franchise history. Puckett passed him with 3 hits against the Kansas City Royals in an 11-4 Minnesota victory, giving him 2,088 hits. For a player who had been described early in his career primarily through singles, the record carried a particular meaning. It measured not just one hot season, but years of being present, productive, and difficult to remove from the lineup. The 1994 season ended because of the players' strike. The stoppage cut short Puckett's chance to continue building on his RBI title and left the season unfinished across baseball. He returned in 1995, but the end of his playing career arrived in a way no one could have planned. On September 28, against Cleveland, Dennis Martinez hit Puckett with a fastball and broke his jaw. It was the final plate appearance of Puckett's career. At that point, there was no announcement that this was the end, no final farewell arranged around a meaningful milestone. The last game simply became the last game after the fact. Puckett was still performing well the following spring. In Grapefruit League play in 1996, he batted .344. Then, on March 28, he woke up without vision in his right eye.
The diagnosis was initially described as glaucoma, and he was placed on the disabled list for the first time in his professional career. 3 surgeries followed, but the vision did not return. The condition was later identified as a central retinal vein occlusion. The physical world of the game had suddenly narrowed. A player whose career had depended on tracking a ball through the outfield, judging its flight, and reacting in an instant, could no longer see properly out of one eye. Puckett announced his retirement on July 12, 1996, at age 36. The timing made the loss difficult to interpret as a normal ending. He had not gradually faded out of the lineup. He had not reached the final season of a long decline. His career stopped while there was still evidence of the player he had been. A .344 spring average, a recent RBI title, a franchise hits record, and a place among the best all-around players of his era. He had played his entire 12-year major league career with the Minnesota Twins. Afterward, the organization kept him close, naming him an executive vice president. He also received the 1996 Roberto Clemente Award for community service. Minnesota retired his number 34 in 1997. The number went into the same permanent category as the memory of his career, fixed,
visible, and attached to the franchise long after he could no longer take the field. Puckett finished with 2,304 hits, 414 doubles, 57 triples, 207 home runs, 1,085 runs batted in, and 134 stolen bases.
His career batting average was .318. He won 6 Gold Gloves and 6 Silver Slugger Awards, made 10 American League All-Star teams, and helped the Twins win 2 World Series. Those numbers describe durability as much as brilliance. He played 1,783 games and spent most of them in the center of the field, where every inning asked him to cover ground, and every season asked him to come back the next day. In 2001, the Baseball Writers Association of America elected Puckett to the Baseball Hall of Fame in his first year of eligibility. By then, the baseball case was complete. The early doubts had been answered in the only language the game recognizes over time: hits, games, awards, championships, and the trust of a franchise. But Puckett's life after baseball did not remain as simple as the image preserved in those honors. His weight increased after retirement, eventually reaching nearly 300 pounds. His marriage to Tanya, whom he had married in 1986, ended in divorce in 2002. They had 2 children. That same year, court filings involving Puckett and his former wife became public. One woman sought an order of protection against Tanya Puckett, alleging threats connected to an affair with Puckett. Another woman sought protection from Puckett and alleged that he had shoved her during an 18-year relationship. In September 2002, Puckett was accused of groping a woman in a restaurant bathroom.
He was charged with false imprisonment, 5th-degree criminal sexual conduct, and 5th-degree assault. He was found not guilty on all counts. The legal outcome is part of the record, just as the allegations and the public reporting that followed are part of it. In 2003, Sports Illustrated published an article that contrasted Puckett's public image with allegations made about his private life, including claims of physical abuse, threats, and multiple adulterous relationships. The stories changed how many people understood the man they had once seen celebrating at the Metrodome. The cheerful public image did not disappear from baseball history, but it no longer stood alone. This is where the story requires care. Puckett's baseball achievements remain documented and substantial. The allegations that followed his retirement cannot simply be erased because he was popular or because he was a Hall of Famer. At the same time, the criminal case ended with a not guilty verdict, and the source does not support turning the later controversies into a complete explanation of his life. The public had known a player through the way he played. The private record introduced circumstances that the stadium had never shown. Puckett's final years were also shaped by the people who remained connected to him. He shared his home in Phoenix with his fiancée, Jody Olson. He remained connected to his 2 children and to former teammates who had known him through the Twins' championship years. On the morning of March 5, 2006, Puckett suffered a massive hemorrhagic stroke at home. He underwent emergency surgery to relieve pressure on his brain, but the surgery failed. Former teammates and coaches traveled to Phoenix during his final hours. Among those present or nearby were members of the 1991 Twins, including Shane Mack and Kent Herbick. His 2 children were also at his bedside. Puckett died on March 6, 2006, 6 days before his 46th birthday. The autopsy recorded the cause of death as a cerebral hemorrhage due to hypertension. He was 45 years old. The age made the ending feel even more abrupt. Puckett had already been forced out of baseball by the loss of vision in one eye. Now his life ended before the distance of time could settle the complicated parts of his reputation. 4 years later, on April 12, 2010, a statue of Puckett was unveiled at Target Field in Minneapolis. It showed him pumping his fist while running the bases after the winning home run in Game 6 of the 1991 World Series. The statue preserved the image that had first opened this story. But by then, the image carried more than celebration. It carried the path that led to the moment. The apartment in Chicago, the wall he practiced against, the job at Ford,
the open tryout, the transfer to Triton, the $20,000 contract, and the first 5 seasons spent becoming indispensable.
It carried the seasons that came after the championship, when he continued to hit, moved to right field, passed Rod Carew's franchise hits record, and led the league in RBI. It carried the abrupt morning when vision disappeared and the game ended without his permission. And it carried the uncomfortable years that complicated the public memory after he was no longer able to answer questions through performance. So how did Kirby Puckett build a Hall of Fame career in only 12 seasons? And why did the story not end with the home run that sent the Twins to Game 7? He did it by turning an uncertain beginning into relentless presence. He became a star through the full range of the game: contact, power, speed, defense, durability, and the ability to meet the biggest moment when it arrived. The home run against Charlie Liebrand was the image that survived because it was perfect television and unforgettable baseball. But it mattered because Puckett had already spent years making himself the kind of player who could define a game in more than one way. His career was compressed by illness. His public memory was complicated by what became known after retirement. Neither fact cancels the other. Kirby Puckett remains the player who came from a path few scouts expected, became the center fielder Minnesota built around, helped deliver 2 championships, and left the field while he was still capable of more.
At Target Field, the statue shows him with his arms raised, running toward the celebration. The full story is harder than that single image. It is also larger.